How often have you heard someone make a prediction about the end of the world? Happens quite regularly, doesn't it? And you see it, especially if you look at the tabloid magazines when you're at the grocery store waiting to check out. Every week there's a new one there, I think. There was a guy named Harold Camping. I don't know if you've heard of him or not. He died just a year or two ago, I think. He tried to predict the end of the world several times. First, he said it would happen on September 6, 1994. And then when that didn't work out, he changed the date to September 29th. And then when he woke up on September 30th, he moved it to October 2nd. And obviously, that didn't work out either. So after those three misses, he set the date for March 31st, 1995. And that didn't work out either. So he took a break for a little while. And after a few years, he took another shot at it and claimed that on May 21st, 2011, God was going to take something like 3% of the population of the earth. And then October 22nd of the same year, everything would be wiped out. And obviously that didn't quite come true. There have been, this is just an example, there have been hundreds and hundreds of people down through the centuries who have tried to predict what was going to happen when God decides to break back into our world. But as far as I can tell, none of those predictions have been very accurate. What's interesting to me is that people like Harold Camping and all these others before him have tried to use the Bible to pick a date for the end of the world. But the Bible specifically says that God alone knows when and how it's going to happen. And like I just mentioned, this is nothing new. People have been trying to do it since the time of Jesus, even though Jesus himself said there was no way to figure it out. And as we look down through the centuries, we see failed attempt after failed attempt after failed attempt to put these things in order and decide just when God is going to come back and set everything right. This theme of prophecy and predicting the future is something that seems incredibly alluring to some people. I myself don't spend a lot of time on it, but some people really, really spend a ton of time researching this stuff and trying to figure it out. And we're going to look today at Mark chapter 13. And this is a chapter of Mark that has provided fuel for a lot of these interesting theories and ideas that people have put forth. See, Mark 13 is full of kind of strange prophetic material, and people have latched onto it while overlooking the context and the thrust of what was being said and tried to use it to predict things in the future. I think it's important for us to understand that prophecy in the Bible is kind of a strange thing. It's not necessarily the magic crystal ball that some people want to make it into. And it'd be fun if it was, but it's just not quite like that. When we read a prophetic message in the Bible, it almost always has an immediate application to the people to whom it was originally given. Okay? But at the same time, history will reveal that there are other things, other events that it applies to further down the road. It's a little like the things we sometimes say to people in our lives that have a double meaning. Have you ever said something to somebody with kind of a double meaning, maybe kind of a snarky remark? You wouldn't do that, right? Sometimes a loved one will do something that aggravates us, and it might build up for a while, and then we'll say something about it. And when we say something, it seems like we're just talking about this one thing, but there's really all these other things behind it causing us to say what we're saying. Like, say I forget to load the dishwasher for like 3 weeks, and Sarah just takes care of my dishes for those 3 weeks and never says anything. Now this is purely hypothetical, okay? This would never happen because I'm a model husband, of course. If you believe that, I got some stuff I'd like to sell you. So after a while of me not putting the dishes in the dishwasher, Sarah would start to get kind of frustrated, right? And then one day I would do something totally unrelated, like leave the newspaper out on the table instead of putting it in the recycling. I'd just bite my head off for leaving one newspaper out, right? And I don't understand, because we're talking about just a single newspaper. Why is it such a big deal, right? But there's really all of this other stuff in her mind driving those comments, because I haven't done the dishes for 3 weeks. So what she says has a whole lot more meaning than what I understand in the moment. Yeah, it's for me to put the newspaper away right then, but there's also these other things. So a little later on, we talk about what's really going on with the newspaper, and then I'm able to grasp the fuller meaning of what is going on and what she's trying to say to me when she tells me that I never do anything around the house and just go around making messes, right? It was one newspaper. One newspaper. Now this is fictitious story, but it's based in reality, as I'm sure you know. But there's a second meaning that I didn't get at first, right? And biblical prophecy is a little like that. There's that first main meaning for the original audience, and we have to try to grasp that original meaning for the original people, and then we can see how it applies down through the ages and eventually to us. So I want to read this morning the last few verses of Mark chapter 13. Now we're going to kind of talk about the whole chapter, but it's way too long to do that, so we're just going to kind of skip around a little bit. And, we're going to look at 32 through 37 in Mark 13. It says, "But about that day or hour no one knows, not even the angels in heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. Be on guard, be alert. You do not know when that time will come. It's like a man going away. He leaves his house and puts his servants in charge, each with their assigned task, and tells the one at the door to keep watch. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know when the owner of the house will come back, whether in the evening or at midnight or when the rooster crows or at dawn. If he comes suddenly, do not let him find you sleeping. What I say to you, I say to everyone, watch." And this short passage here contains the two most important verses in all of chapter 13. But when people use Mark 13 to try and predict the future, they kind of tend to overlook these two verses. Verses 32 and 33 say, "But about that day or hour no one knows, not even the angels in heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. Be on guard, be alert. You do not know when the time will come." So I would think that would settle the matter, and that's it. That's it. Nobody would try to predict the end of history or whatever, but it doesn't work that way. People still try to do it. And I think this happens partly because people take some of Jesus' words out of context. Okay? And then they try to make them say things that maybe they're saying, but maybe they're not. So in order for us to understand what Jesus is saying in this chapter of Mark, we have to look at the context in which it was spoken. In the last few weeks, we've been talking about Mark chapter 11 and chapter 12. And there, Jesus primarily dealt with this escalating conflict between him and the religious elite, Pharisees and the Sadducees and all that, and the way that they distorted what God wanted. Okay? And if you've read Mark, then you know that in the next couple of chapters, Jesus is going to be crucified and then resurrect. And if you haven't read the story, that's okay, because we're going to be talking about that over the next couple of weeks coming up to Easter. So chapter 13 it's part of this rising conflict between Jesus and the religious status quo, the religious elite. And it culminates really in Jesus' crucifixion and then his resurrection. So that's the general context. But if we go back to the beginning of chapter 13, we also get a clue as to what Jesus has in mind for this section. Okay? Mark 13, 1 and 2 says, as Jesus was leaving the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Look, teacher, what massive stones, what magnificent buildings. Do you see all these great buildings?" Jesus replied. "Not one stone will be left on another. Everyone will be thrown down." So here in chapter 13, Jesus is talking again, just like in chapters 11 and 12, about the temple and the whole corrupt religious system being overturned, being changed. That's the main thrust. It's what the focus is here. And as we look back through history, we can see that this happened in AD 70, when Titus invaded Jerusalem and destroyed the temple. And that event, the destruction of the temple, the physical destruction, when combined with Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection, it completely changed the face of religion at that point in time. But even though Jesus was talking about something that was going to happen to his disciples in the very near future or our very distant past, there are also things that we can learn about how to live our lives in this present day. There is an application. There is some things that we're going to learn from this. So I'd really like to go verse by verse through the whole chapter, but that would put everyone to sleep. And Alan told me expressly not to put her to sleep today because she's tired and everyone else is tired. So I won't do that. But if anybody would like to discuss that stuff with me, I would enjoy it because I am a theology nerd, and so we can get a gallon of coffee and discuss it sometime if you would like. Anyway, let's look at verses 5 and 6. It says, Jesus said to them, "Watch out that no one deceives you. Many will come in my name, claiming I am he, and will deceive many." This right here initially referred to several revolutionaries and wannabe messiahs that rose up around the time of Jesus and just after his life on earth, before AD 70. And they led people astray. That's what Jesus was talking about. But like Sarah's hypothetical frustration with me for not doing the dishes for 3 weeks, there's more underneath the surface here than just what happened in the past. Today, we see cult leaders, right? We see people like, I'm picking on Harold Camping because I can't talk about 500 people, so I'm picking one person that has led people astray with false prophecies. But we see people like that are always predicting things that don't come true. We're constantly bombarded with messages that tell us that we just need this or that new thing to be happy, right? We just need to get this job or make this amount of money and everything's going to be okay, right? And all of those things pull us away from focusing on God. Just like what Jesus was warning about. All those things are trying to lead us astray. And they're sneaky little things that we deal with today. A lot of these things that come and go, there's good in them. And we have to learn how to separate the good from the bad and know when something is pulling us away from God and away from how we should be living our lives. So I think that Jesus' warning really applies just as much to us today as it did 2,000 years ago. About watching out, making sure that we're following the truth. And we need to be careful and we need to study the Bible so we can recognize the truth from the lie. You know how they train people to recognize counterfeit money? They have them handle real money a lot. Study it, look at it, feel it. So that then when they come upon a counterfeit, they can tell instantly that something's just not quite right. Something's just a little bit off. Because they've studied the real thing so much. And that's kind of how we should view God's Word. We study it so much that we know instantly, okay, this seems good, but it's really it's leading my attention away from God, and we know that we need to be careful. So moving on, in the next 25 verses or so, we see several interesting descriptions and warnings, and I'm not going to go into detail on all of these because it would be very boring. So, like I said, if you want to talk to me about them, that would be wonderful, and we can do that. We can do that one-on-one. But if we jump on down to verse 30, we find another important clue to interpreting this passage of Scripture. Jesus says in verse 30, "Truly I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened." If you're going to interpret this passage as something that has yet to come, this verse presents a real problem. Right? When Jesus said this, he made it very clear that there was an immediate application to what he was saying. Not that there's no future application as well, because there certainly is. But he could not have been speaking only of some future event thousands of years away and said this, right? Either we have to understand that there was a fulfillment of all of this stuff within that generation, or we have to say that Jesus was lying. So we have to pick one. Yeah. But let me say again, just because he was speaking about something happening in a near time frame does not mean that there is not a future application. It does not mean that it is not amplified and speaking about something that we have not witnessed yet as well. Okay? So I do believe that these words, that what Jesus is talking about, have relevance for us today, and they have something important for us to say to us as well. So what we have here is a message for a particular people in a particular time in a particular place that also carries meaning for us a couple thousand years later, and for the people that will come after us as well. The point for us, I believe, is found in the final few verses that I read at the beginning. It's to be alert. Like the servants who were put in charge and didn't know when their master was going to come back. There's a scenario that's been portrayed in TV and the movies countless times. I can't even count how many times I've seen this done and redone. The parents decide to go away for a weekend, a little vacation, and they have kids that are maybe early teens or something, maybe one of them's in high school, and they decide, oh, the kids are old enough, we can leave them at home for a weekend, right? You've seen this on TV many times, I'm sure. And the kids invariably decide to throw this huge, huge party on Friday night, right? Parents leave Friday afternoon. Whole school's invited to the party on Friday night. And the kids figure that they have until Sunday afternoon to clean it up, because that's when mom and dad are coming back. And since they have until Sunday afternoon to fix everything, what do? Being responsible kids, they lay around all day Saturday and sleep, and then figure that Sunday they're going to fix it, right? And then something always happens and makes the parents call the kids, or makes the parents decide to come home early, right? Excuse me. And maybe they decide to call the kids and tell them they're coming home early, and then the kids spend the next hour or two just killing themselves trying to put everything back together and stuffing the garbage in the couch and whatever else. Or the parents just show up early and then they bust the kids, right, for the party, for destroying the house. And I'm sure you've seen it on TV. Maybe you've experienced it in real life, being either the parent or the child, either way. Now, I'm not advocating this. I'm just going to make an observation here. If the kids would simply listen to Jesus' advice in these verses to watch and be ready, they would get away with the party and destroying the house every single time, right? It's good advice. Kids, I'm not advocating trashing the house when your parents leave, but Jesus' advice here is very good, and it has many applications. But it almost never fails. They wait until the last minute to try and put things right. And it catches up with them. But Jesus is telling us that we don't know when the end is coming. We just need to be faithful and be prepared, no matter what happens. You see, Jesus' disciples didn't know when he was going to be crucified. They didn't know when the temple that they were so impressed with was going to be destroyed. Jesus was just calling them to be faithful and be ready, no matter what was going to come in the future. And we could have a terrible car accident tomorrow. We live in a scary world. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day. But no matter what happens around us, no matter how certain or imminent the world's destruction might seem to you, we can be certain that God is with us, right alongside of us, walking through everything that we're facing as long as we want him there, as long as we ask him to be with us. And the message for us today is that we need to be sure our lives are in order today so that we're not caught off guard. Maybe in order to do that, you would need to place faith and trust in God for the first time. Maybe you've kind of fallen asleep, and maybe you need to recommit. Maybe you need to reaffirm that faith and that trust that you've had for years and just continue to move forward. I don't know where you're at, but wherever you are today, God is calling for each of us to be faithful, to trust him, and to be ready no matter what comes our way, no matter what kind of difficulties we face. I'm going to ask Rena and Hugo to come, and we're going to sing that last song again. Just let's think while we sing the song and before we begin to pray about how we can apply this to our lives, how we can watch, how we can be faithful, how we can be sure that we're focusing in the right direction and not being led astray. Let's sing together.